Welcome to this webinar on Edgecam technology that was included in the Edgecam 2016 R1 and 2016 R2 software versions collectively. Our objective here is not to go over every single new thing in the software over those versions. That's certainly more than we can do in a brief webinar. But it's to highlight some technology that we feel widely appeals to our customer base that we want people to know how to use. We certainly encourage you to look at this collection of technology that's happened over the last several releases in conjunction with the documentation available in What's New, where some information is provided. Additionally, this technology review does touch on some things that perhaps a little bit more in depth and with additional information than what's readily available on the surface in What's New. So we hope that you find this extremely valuable, and thank you for your time today. This is a live webcast. I'm not a recording, so this is live. I may have some ums now and then, and that's how you know it's live. We will have a Q&A at the back end of it, and during the presentation we're going to mute this so that everyone can hear what's going on without any background noise. So I want to talk about some of the software essentials. These are things that are often a significant amount of development work, but may not be the things that readily jump out as something new or a technology change, but they are very useful to many, many users. The first is that Edgecam is now fully a 64-bit software application. This is a project that's been underway for some time, and different components of the software have been redeveloped as full 64-bit, and that project is now completed at Edgecam 2016 R2. So it means that Edgecam's never had the choice of a 32 or 64-bit version. The software has always auto-detected what operating system you're running, and if you're running a 64-bit, any components of the software that are 64-bit components will automatically run. All of that changes at Edgecam 2016 R2. The software is now a fully 64-bit application and is only going to support 64-bit operating systems following Microsoft's lead. That's Windows 7 and Windows 10, both 64-bit applications. So what does that mean for the average user? Sometimes folks in industry or those of us that buy computers think that with 64-bit the computer is going to inherently run faster. And often the performance is faster, but it actually has more to do with memory than anything else. We've included a snapshot from Microsoft, and with Windows 7, the 32-bit applications would only use 4 gig of installed memory or physical RAM. So you could go get 16 or 32 gig of RAM, but the computer would only use 4. When you use a 64-bit version of that with 64-bit hardware, the limit now increases to 192 gig. So there's a tremendous amount of additional memory available to be used, and this means that engineering software applications such as CAD or CAM software can access memory, more calculations can be done in memory instead of running out to physical hard disk, and larger parts often come through better. And that is exactly the improvements that we see as well with Edgecam. So this means that at Edgecam 2016 R2, when you install the software, the default path is C drive program files, Vero software, software developer, and then under that your Edgecam 2016 R2 folder. In older versions, the software installed into C drive program files and the x86 folder under the hard disk. Again, that's how Microsoft suggests that software programs be organized, and that's where you'll see things. A little bit of a change, big performance improvements for many customers, especially those with large parts. The cool thing is you don't have to do anything. Here's another one where you kind of don't have to do anything. You can just get to use it. The software now has a new option to store the graphics data for a solid internally when the solid's loaded, and this makes it possible to load a solid faster when the part's reopened in the future. Many of our customers with large parts have some amount of time waiting for files to open, and that's processed, and we're going to see how that improves and how it's much faster now. There's also a dynamic Windows preview, and we'll show you what that is as well. But the new software option to store graphics data that enables this technology to work is on by default. So when you open Edgecam 2016 R2 and go to File and Preferences into the Solids tab, you'll see the Store Graphics Data option. It's already checked for you. It is possible to turn off, but most users will want to have it on. The Update Stock command has also been optimized. This was work that was completed at Edgecam 2016 R1. The Update Stock command is not a new command. It's been around in the software for many years, and it's part of how the software is able to have in-process stock, where the software recognizes what's been happening to the material as we do machining and able to build tool path that works with the current stock shape and eliminates unnecessary air cuts. Well, when these commands are in the instruction list, in the process list in Edgecam, when users regenerate, there's some time that adds to do the internal calculations of what the stock looks like. And there's been some performance work done over the years to try to improve that. And there was more work done at Edgecam 2016 R1 where users can now control the precision and allowable file size for the internal stock models that are built. Additionally, the simulator's quit on close option, which was introduced a few versions back, is now unchecked by default. So what that does is when we're in the middle of simulation and we see something looks good, we go back to our program and continue. The next time we go to simulation, the simulation picks right back up where we left off. That's a function of the quit on close, and it was also tied into how Update Stock worked. That function is now unchecked because of performance improvements. So what are they? Well, one of the performance improvements that make Update Stock faster is that behind the scenes, Update Stock is running the simulator to get an updated view of the part. And in the past, it was considering everything that we'd normally look at in simulator: the full machine, the work holding fixtures, the tool assemblies, and obviously the stock and tool path that's being built. When we go to simulator, that still happens, but when Update Stock is running, which is kind of a background use of the simulation technology, only the stock model is updated and not all the rest of it. So just that coupled with other performance improvements really make it so that when you regenerate machining instructions in the current versions of Edgecam, they will regenerate much faster than the old versions. With that said, we don't want you to take away from that you kind of had license to just use Update Stock wherever you want to. I mean, you can, and the software certainly is going to run faster than it did before. However, we still suggest using it only in those cases where it truly makes some sense for you. Those are some ideas that we cover in training, different uses of it. So many of our users that have been through training recently probably recall some of that. So let's go take a look at the store graphics data and what that does. I'm going to begin here with opening actually an older version of Edgecam. So if we look at About, you can see that I'm running Edgecam 2016.10, meaning 2016 R1, with Service Update 7. That is the latest service update for 2016 R1 version. In there, we're going to work with a file. So this file I'm looking at, just by way of just some FYI information for you. If you right-click over the file and you go to Properties, the Custom tab allows us to see what version of Edgecam the file was last saved in. We can see this file has been saved in Edgecam 2016 R1 Service Update 5. It was originally created in Edgecam 2015 R2. This is a kind of handy thing for us on the support desk because we can look at the version that a customer is working in and make sure that we're working in that same version in our support investigations. But it's also useful for some users when they're trying to determine what software version was a part last built in. So just a little side note. I'm going to take that file and let's open it up in Edgecam and we'll kind of do a countdown clock here. So I'm obviously lost a couple of seconds, but we're going to count how long it takes for that part to finish the file open process and for the taskbar in the lower left corner to finally say ready. During this time, we really can't do anything other than chat, have some coffee, or what have you. Okay, so let's say that was 20 seconds plus there was some additional time. Let's say it's upwards of 20 seconds, maybe 25 or so. You can see the part loaded in. At this point, we can begin to do some work. By way of comparison, let's now close that version of Edgecam, and I'm going to open up Edgecam 2016 R2 and we'll make some comparisons. I'm opening a brand new session of Edgecam 2016 R2, and we'll go open that same part. While it's opening, let's clear out the timer. and now we'll go and take and open the file. So I'll open, I'll start the timer. Now I want to point out that we're going to have a comparable open time the first time around in the new version of Edgecam in 2016 R2. It's going to be a comparable amount of time to open the part, but once I save the part and the software now internalizes the solid model, we're going to see much faster performance on reopens in the future. So this was slightly faster. We got that done in roughly 20 seconds as opposed to maybe around 25 on the previous part. Okay, minor improvement, but let's see what happens next. I'm going to save this, and we're going to save it in the current folder, but I'm going to call it 2016 R2 speed test. So I'll save a new file. Now behind the scenes, once that's saved, if I go over to File and go to Preferences, notice that on the solids page, the new store graphics data preference is checked, and that is going to be checked by default. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely close Edgecam so that anyone who's slightly suspicious of whether we're doing up to anything tricky here, we can put that to rest. I'm going to open up a brand new session, so we have to open the part from the ground up. Although quite frankly we don't have to. You'll see the same improvements when we load the file in. Let's reset the clock. I'm going to take the new 2016 R2 speed test, drop it in, press start, and we'll see how long it takes till we're ready. Done. So let's say that we're approximately 5 to 6 seconds on a subsequent file open to open that same part and be ready to go. As you can see, this is not an incredibly complex part. Edgecam is a tier 2 CAM system with a tremendous amount of flexibility. Ability to create toolpath for lathes, mills, wire EMs, including multi-axis and mill turns and tombstone machining, and some of our customer parts can become very complicated. So ability to load the file very quickly is a huge asset. Another thing I want to mention here too is this preview area. So if we go up to the window or to the view and you have the preview pane on like I do here, this allows you to see a file preview image for any type of file format that provides that. Well, this new file that we saved, if I click on that file preview image, notice that I see a preview image of the part minus the machine and fixture graphics, which is kind of helpful. But also if I right click on it and kind of move the mouse around, I can actually see a dynamic preview of that part right from Windows Explorer. That can be, again, very helpful for customers with many files on the network and they're trying to figure out what file is what very quickly without having to commit to opening it. So some neat technology there. Okay. So resuming with some of the new technology that just generally appeals to software users. There's been some improvements to the tool store database. So behind the scenes, Edgecam's tooling database, I just call it the database now. It does a lot more than store tools. Sure, it's your company's virtual tool crib, but it can also store the common part materials that you cut, the tooling grades you use and their cutting data lookups. It can store common work holding fixtures that you have, common specialty stock shapes such as castings or extrusions or forgings or things like that multiple parts are machined from. It can organize existing tooling into setup packages or job kits and create setup reports out of that. So there's really a ton of things the database does, and Edgecam's database uses Microsoft SQL Server as the database foundation. So it is an open architecture database, and some users actually do some interaction with other database systems at work because, again, it's an open architecture database system. So at the end of the day, for the average user, none of that matters. But Edgecam now uses SQL Server 2014, so there's been an update from the older versions of SQL Server to the latest version, just again part of normal software maintenance, keeping up to date with latest technology on market. And in that version of SQL Server, Microsoft has made available a new option for working with the database as a user called LocalDB. It uses less resources than the SQL Express and is runs a little bit faster performance improvements, particularly IT staff at some of our larger customers who may have SQL Enterprise running for other applications of the company are very pleased that we're running SQL Server 2014 and ability to use LocalDB as well now. Another housekeeping task, the HTML setup reports have been around for a long time. They're essentially legacy data now, and they are retired at Edgecam 2016 R2. This has been noted for some time in the software discussion forums, in What's New, and other places where we get this kind of information and share it with users. So some time ago, the live job reports were introduced into Edgecam as a newer technology to do this intended function of taking existing data in the database, much of which can be collected automatically during the programming process, to be shared potentially with downstream consumers in the machine shop as setup reports, without them having to have any Edgecam software installed on their machine. So the live job reports are a faster reporting system than the old HTML-based job reports that they're replacing, and they have some additional benefits as well. Much faster searching capability, ability to create and export PDFs, Word documents, and Excel files from the data that, again, the end user can just trigger and do. And with the basically with that being fairly acceptable way to share data now, the old system has been retired. So anyone who's using the old system, just go into 2016 R2 knowing that you'll just be able to make a smooth switch over to live job reports and continue to share your data just with a more modern way of distributing it. In the database Tslot Cutters, there's been some improvements there. If you have applications where you're doing some machining with a Tslot cutter and a kind of a slot where there's an upper shelf, it was fairly tricky in older versions to program things in a way that considered where the back end of the tool truly was, and so there's a new secondary gauge point that makes this much simpler to do. So you can simply open your Tslot Cutters and choose whether you're gauging off the tool tip, which is called primary, or the back side of the tool, which is called secondary, and then quickly build the tool path you need. For the turning crowd, there's some improvements to thread tools. So in the past, a threading insert didn't really give users control over how big the insert size would be, only to the distance between the tip of the tool and the kind of the root of the thread and the major diameter of the thread, so to speak. We can now use inscribed circle to more accurately define a threading insert without having to resort to custom graphics for those. Additionally, we've got some changes to the way that RS232 communications are handled. They're now retired at Edgecam 2016 R2, and it basically means that they're pulled out of the software. What does that mean to you? Well, it means that if we go to the Edgecam launcher and we scroll over it, we no longer see the comms. The comms, the RS232 communications utility, used to be right over here after Code Wizard before you returned back to the main area. It is now available as a download from the Vero customer portal. It's a free download, so it's a freeware utility now, which means it can be used without a license at all for those customers that want it, but it's also something that many users have different ways of handling, and so it's no longer included as a licensed component of software, and it's just been made freely available. One of the things that we're curious about for many of our users is what you want to do with sending stuff to your machine. So I'd like to launch a quick poll. And there's a poll in progress. We'll leave it open for the next minute or so. So if you look at your control browser here, you'll be able to see the poll question that is really, how does your company send CNC code files to your CNC machines? And you can check all that apply. So for example, if you rely on the CAM system to provide RS232 comms, that's the first answer. Some companies have a DNC system, which may be a better way to transmit programs to multiple CNC machines and really allow the machines to control remote requesting and even data collection. Some companies use an RS232 package from different machine tool providers. Others just have a flash drive or something, maybe a USB port or a PCMCIA card that is able to let the machine quickly read programs from a device like that, and still other machines are network compatible. We're wondering what kind you have. So if you could just fill us in on that. Appreciate the inputs on that. You know, for those of you who use the RS232 communications and count on the CAM system to provide that, we want you to know that the RS232 comms you're used to seeing in older versions is still there, but you'll have to download it as a separate download. But the advantage to you is that you can now run that on any computer. It does not require an Edgecam license anymore. So for those of you who still rely on that, it's still there. All right, great. Thanks for your input on the poll. We'll go ahead and close that and talk about a few things in the user interface. Probably the biggest thing that people notice when they open up Edgecam 2016 R2 is the setup window. When the modern Edgecam interface was introduced, we call it the workflow interface. When that was introduced at Edgecam 2013 R2, the component setup window is a very visible part of the setup tab. This is a really useful window. It provides part setup information such as the material we're cutting, the dimensions of the part, and then once we put in stock, the dimensions of the stock that was added. It also allows from the Datum and Position tab for very fast part alignment and orientation and establishing where our program origin will be. Really useful command. It saves a ton of time at building the virtual CAM setup so that we can quickly get to the machining tab where we want to do our work in the CAM system. However, a lot of users mentioned that this did not have a way to turn this off. It did not have a way to dock it. You simply had a triangle in the upper corner that you could use to roll it up, but you really couldn't move it off the screen if you wanted to, and they asked for ability to do that. The user feedback's been incorporated at Edgecam 2016 R2, and this is now just called the setup window. So because it's a standard window, you can dock it anywhere you want in the screen. You can even have it on as many tabs as you want. So while it is on the setup tab by default, you could put it on the features or machining tab where it also can be a very useful command to have available. Additionally, the command can be rolled up. So the three main functions to provide setup information, part alignment orientation, and establish program origin are all controlled with three icons that are available in the upper right, and you can choose the icon that responds to the function you want to get access to just that information. Obviously, all three can be turned on at the same time or none of them. It's really up to how you want to run that. So that's probably the biggest visible change. At this version, it's merely pretty much a housekeeping thing. But in future versions, there certainly is interest in trying to expand the capability that you can do here to just put more of the information that folks typically need to get to and common modifications that we make to the virtual CAM assembly able to be easily done. So where do you find that? Well, you'll notice that when you're on the Setup tab, it's now a Setup window, and all the functionality is provided there, which means you can go to the Windows drop-down menu, which is off in the upper right side of the software up here to find that and turn it on and off as needed. Other information in the user interface. Pictures on the dialog boxes is a project that started many years back, and there's, believe it or not, some of these machining cycles, although it doesn't seem on the surface to us as an end user like a big deal, some of them have dozens of images that have to be produced. And creating the graphic images can take some time. At this point in time today, collection of Edgecam 2016 R1 and R2, many new milling cycles have had the graphic images added to them. So at this point, there's only a handful that do not yet have the graphic images. Obviously, that work will continue in future versions, but now many of the mill cycles have full graphic images in the dialog boxes to help make sense of the information available to you as a programmer to control. Another minor improvement to the interface in the view controls that are on the inverted L-shaped utility at the upper left corner of each viewport. When you go to the machine drop-down area, there's now 2 rows of icons. The top row quickly turns on and off the machine display. We've had that ability for quite some time in the new interface. But the new thing is the second row, where you can turn on and off individual elements of the machine, which is defined in the post processor. So that might be the base and guards and axis mounts and head and table and things like that. This was a capability we actually had in the old interface, but an improvement here is that if you had turned on or off some of the components of the machine and then turn the machine display back on, all of the items down here now show up and easily turn back on for you. So some nice improvements there. Probably my personal favorite at Edgecam 2016 R2, and the favorite of most everyone who's dug into the software, is the new comment field. That's available in all the cycles. So when you open an existing cycle, you'll notice that you now have a comment field shown. What does this do for you? Well, there's kind of a couple benefits. The benefit to the CNC machinist is that if you want to provide a comment to help the machinist understand what's happening at this point in the program, simply add it to the cycle. And before all of the CNC code coordinates that will result from that CAM command, the machinist will see a comment that's exactly what you put in here. So in the past, users felt like they had to go to the miscellaneous drop-down list and issue a separate comment command in any place they wanted to put a comment into the code, and now you can directly do that right in the cycle, adds a level of convenience and reduces the amount of instructions in the process list. The benefit for the user is also worth noting. These are visible in the sequence window. So you notice here that in this screenshot we're showing a comment called heavy roughing put into the rough waveform turn cycle, and that comment is also visible in the sequence window. So we see the name of the cycle and then the comment that was put in. If you don't see a comment, it just means the user didn't input one. Additionally, these are searchable. So if we were to right-click in the sequence window and use the search function, whatever you put in here is searchable, and that's, again, a good benefit to the end user. Okay. A couple of other miscellaneous stuff. The create sequence command has been added to the machining tab. That command is typically on the setup tab, and it is the place that we often go to either create the first sequence in our part to complete the virtual CAM setup, and also to create additional secondary sequences that are relational to previous ones. So I've done the first side of the part, and now I want to flip it over and do the second side, all in the same model. And maybe then after that I want to send it out to a mill for secondary milling operations. That's still the way we should use the software. However, there's been cases, I've done it myself, where you get started, you go over to the machining tab, and you see the note that you have to make a sequence first. And oh, shoot, I forgot to do that, and head back to setup. You don't have to do that anymore. You can do that right from the machining tab. Additionally, there's cases where we may want to create a secondary sequence, maybe make an alternate routing or some minor adjustments to rework a part or something like that. And we really don't need the relational setup and just want to make a quick setup on the fly. Don't need to really do a whole new setup. Well, the new sequence is convenient there too. Additionally, when you create a sequence, the update stock settings are now available on the third page of the create sequence dialog. So this allows you to set some parameters for your preferences for how the background update stock settings should work on the part. For those of you who insert multiple solids into a part session in Edgecam, maybe build an internal assembly or something like that, the automatic alignment controls have been added to the insert solid command. So this is great. It saves a step. In the past, we might have to insert the solid, and then we might have to go reposition it, where now we can insert solid, configure the automatic alignment, and get both actions done in one shot. A new capability in here that's really great is the ability to filter entities by color. We're going to show you how that works. And for me personally, this is a command that's really handy, and I didn't realize until it was available how handy it is. So it's kind of one of those things that you never had and maybe didn't miss, but now that it's there, and once you know how to use it, I think you'll find it very helpful. Another one is web-based help. So if you may have noticed that if you're in an Edgecam cycle dialog and you click on the question in the lower left corner, it launches the help system and it launches it in your web browser. So if you have a connection to the internet, Edgecam will go get the online help. If you don't have a connection to the internet, it does use a locally installed help system. With the web-based help, the development team can update the help system much more quickly and potentially provide some additional information on top of what's normally in the help system as well. So nice little housekeeping thing, just again, modernizing software based on current capabilities. Some improvements to feature recognition worth noting. The partial whole angle option is really useful in situations where users have a dog bone or a back relief or some kind of a cutback maybe in a pocket or something. So there's a partial whole angle field in the lower left of the whole options where you can control basically some directives to the software about whether those things should be recognized as holes or not based on the included angle of that. Just makes the job a little quicker. Again, another one is hole grouping based on through clearance. So if you imagine a part where we show the cross section is shown in this graphic, and there's 4 different holes that are the same diameter. So they start at the same height, they're the same diameter, they finish at the same bottom condition. In older versions of software, these would be called unique holes. So I'd have one hole group for any holes in this red condition, another one for the holes in the blue group, and another one for the ones in the green group, because they're actually a through limited condition where they are through, but there's other material at some point below that. And because of the difference in the limits underneath, they would be called unique holes. There's a new through clearance that's now been added to the hole options that allow users to specify the through clearance that should result in common holes. And so it's now possible for the software to have some inputs where it understands your machining intent. And we'll create those as a single hole feature that speeds up drilling, tool path creation, and improves tool path ordering and sorting as well. For any of you who use the hole templates, the hole templates are a great technology where you can basically teach Edgecam how to find features for holes based on your input and direction. So if you have a common type of hole that maybe you identify it based on some certain conditions and the counterbore diameter changes, for example, some kind of a fastener. You can teach Edgecam how to recognize your type of hole, so it will call that, a fastener type A hole instead of just a hole, or a fastener type B hole instead of just a hole. Well, now you can have multiple hole templates that you can create that you can recognize on a hole. And again, this is great for companies with a lot of hole drilling or customized specialty fasteners, ports, other things that need to be handled with a specific machining process. One of my favorites in terms of new technology is that the term profile features can now be edited. So the interactive term profile features are great for turning applications where it's desirable to bring in a variety of tools to handle different segments of the turn shape. Turn features are great for being able to quickly say, here's a section of the shape I want to target, here's another shape, and doing it much more easily in some cases than the more automatic feature finder. However, one of the challenges of the turn features is that they cannot be edited, at least they couldn't in prior versions. At Edgecam 2016 R2 they now can. You can edit those turn features, you have the coordinate input switch available, and you can go and add or remove segments from the feature so that existing tool path can just easily update rather than having to be mapped over to potentially a new feature that you have to construct. It makes the software much easier to use, and again, a very popular thing in our turn customer base and one of my favorite things in this version. The Edgecam operations have been upgraded as well. So at Edgecam 2016 R2 or R1, they're upgraded to use the new JavaScript PCIs. This means that if you're looking for examples of how to use JavaScript with operations, they're great examples. But additionally, they use the modern software cycles. So what we mean by that is that, for example, chamfering. Chamfering used to use the older method of doing things where the profiling cycle was used. But there is a new chamfer cycle that's been offered in the software a few versions back that makes chamfering much easier to pull off than the way that the profiling did it. The new chamfering operation uses the new chamfer milling cycle instead of the profiling method. Additionally, at Edgecam 2016 R2, auto indexing is added. What does that mean? Well, if you have a part where you're doing things in a 4 or 5 axis indexing capable machine or on a lathe with live tooling, in the past you had to position the tool to the work plane you want to work in before you could do the operation. If you didn't, you'd get the message that the entity does not lie in the plane of the CPL. You won't see that message anymore. The operations are intelligent enough to auto-index to the feature if needed. Just, again, save some time and effort. And feeds and speeds, you now have control of whether those should be associative. So I want to mention, there are an impact on existing parts. Existing parts, so a file you saved in an older version of Edgecam, it's important that the toolpath continue to build the way that the user has basically left the proven part, and that will happen. Existing machining sequences will continue to build the operation using the type of operation that was built when the file was created. There will be no change to either the software interface or the toolpath regeneration for existing parts. But if you go to create a new roughing operation, for example, or a new chamfering operation, you may see some different things happening because it's using the new operations for those. So again, just making sure that the technology upgrade doesn't impact the proven parts the customers already have, and also gives them flexibility to move forward. Finally, on automatic machining. If you're not using Edgecam's automatic machining commands for either plan or machine feature, you're probably missing out on some things that can really speed up the software operation and potentially capture your process and be able to repeat it on common part geometry that you have. If you're not using the machining strategies because of maybe an attempt early on when they were first put out there, they've been refined significantly, and we'd encourage you to have a fresh look. If you're not using them because you're not familiar with them and what they do, we'd encourage you to consider maybe coming back for a workflow training course, or touch base with us at least, and we'd be happy to discuss what you're trying to do with them and provide some suggestions to help out. At the current versions of Edgecam, we have some improvements to how thread milling's handled, to how slot milling's handled, to be able to do finish milling without requiring that roughing happen first, and to even select whether spot drilling is used or not. All of those are selected. Underneath the plan option, there's a little arrow. If you click on that, you get to options that can control the background processing of these knowledge-based machining routines. So definitely some good improvements on usability and refining how these work. And they should do a great job of being a toolpath accelerator that quickly builds the toolpath for common part features, where you can just confirm, is it the tool you want, switch to a different tool if needed, change a couple cutting parameters, and move on to the next thing in the list. We also suggest looking at them as the idea of what could happen if you were to refine those to better suit your company's specific machining requirements, so that when there's, say, a hole in your part, or you've got a rough turn and then rough bore your part, it's kind of the same process all the time. Just do it our way. That's how those are done for the machining strategies. So I want to show the filter by color, the setup window real quick, and then we'll move on to questions. Okay, so going back over here to Edgecam and opening up a DWG file. When the DWG file opens up and we zoom in on it, I can see some information down there. Let's just delete that real quick and then zoom out here. Now in here, I want to point out a couple things. If I take this item here and select it, we can see that the software reports that the color is lime green. If I do the same thing on, say, one of these pieces of information here, it reports on a color called intense white. Well, it looks black on the screen, and the reason for that is the software recognizes the background color and colors the display of the entity different than its actual color assignment. We could look at that another way by double-clicking on the entity and seeing that its color is the intense white color from the color palette. Let's show how we use the entity filters. I'm going to start by using the delete command, and then I want to delete only the green stuff that's here in this area. You'll notice the entity filter. We've had this for a long time, but what's new here is the ability to select a color as the way to apply a filter. So I can choose the color for lime green, press OK, stretch a window, and only the lime green stuff is picked. Similarly, let's say that what I want to do is change the layer assigned to things, and so the layer assignment needs to be done to the things that are intense white, because I want to separate those from the other things. I can stretch a window. It only selects the stuff that are intense white. Maybe I move it to a layer called manufactured part. And then what I can do is I can move over to that layer, hide that layer, and now I can real easily go delete all the other things that maybe were necessary in the CAD drawing, but I don't need from here, clean up my layer list, and very quickly move on to building the tool path that we need to for this part. I didn't realize how easily color filtering could make the process until we had the technology, and it's a really great thing. Hey, and last on the setup window. So if I open up a brand new solid, you open up a solid, the setup window becomes available, and you'll notice here it's docked in the screen, so I can get to the part information, the datum and position, or the part orientation. Any of those are available, right? So let's say that what I do here is I go add stock on. So I'll turn some of those off just for display purposes. We'll go to stock and I'll make the stock 9 inches by 5 inches by 1 inch. Again, just using the suggestions based on the software's knowledge of the part size. So the stock's built. One of the really cool things here is that we can see the stock dimensions at our fingertips. So let's pretend that we'd already been building toolpath and I want to see the setup stuff. Right from the machining tab, I can choose to display the setup window. I can choose to either leave it pinned on the screen or allow it to dock and float in where I just hover over it as needed. And I can very quickly see, in this case, the setup dimensions and see my stock size at my fingertip without having to make measurements and without having to go back to the setup tab to find it. Additionally, there is some things that you can now do through the setup window that we couldn't in the older versions. One of them is editing the stock. In older versions, we would have users that wanted to modify the stock, go to the features window, and then edit the stock from here to maybe change the color or something like that. We don't have to do that anymore. We can do it directly from the setup window. So I can go directly here and double click on this to edit it and quickly change its color, for example, or other things as well. We can do that with the solid too. So you can quickly edit the raw solid and get to it as well. Just a couple things we wanted to show there to speed up the process. Now for wrap up, I want to go to questions now and see if there's any questions that you have in the either the chat or the questions window. At M2 Technologies, our sales executives, technical advisors, and support team are available to assist with your software applications, questions, and needs. Reach out and let us know how we can help you. Don't miss out on the opportunity to connect with M2. Follow us on social media for updates, special announcements, and exclusive promotions. You can also watch helpful videos on our YouTube channel and visit our blog for tips and tricks that will boost your productivity.